here. The time is yours for as long as you need. We don't stick to a 12 o'clock schedule in this church. So don't be intimidated by the clock, please.
It's like quite an introduction there. Happy Sabbath, everybody. Let's have prayer one more time. Dear Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for another beautiful Sabbath day that you've blessed us with. This has been a very beautiful summer. You're an amazing God, a God of such a wide, vast, ranging universe that takes time to be with each one of us on an individual and daily basis. So I just want to thank you so much for that, Lord. As I am up here preaching your word, like always, Lord, it's not me, it's you. Let this congregation not see anything that has to do with Victor Moore, but everything that has to do with Jesus Christ. So, amen. Alright, so I figured I should introduce myself a little bit, just to let you know who I am. I'm Victor. I've lived in Western Washington my entire life for the last 21 years. I am a graduate of the greatest Adventist high school in Western Washington, Auburn Adventist Academy. Not that I'm biased or anything towards that. Really enjoyed my time there, and now I go to the University of the Southern Caribbean on the Caribbean island of Trinidad. A little bit of an interesting story how I got down there. Trinidad is right off the coast of South America, so you have Jamaica and Cuba and all the Caribbean islands in the north, and then as you go down the Caribbean Sea, you have what I like to personally refer to as all the Saint Islands, because they all sound the same once you start hearing them together. St. Lucia, St. Vincent, the Grenadines, all these dog little islands. But if you talk to any Caribbean islander from any of these islands, their island's the best. Make sure you don't get that mixed up. They have the whitest sands on their island, and even though it's the exact same sea, their water's the warmest, and it's the clearest, and it's the nicest. And then once you get to the end of all of those islands, you got Trinidad, right off the coast of South America. And it's been a really interesting experience for me for several reasons. Starting once is because, once again, I've lived my whole life in Western Washington. And I know in Western Washington we like to complain about how much it rains and how gray and miserable it can be. But I would take that back any second over the type of weather we get in Trinidad, because before I actually got the experience to go down to Trinidad itself and go to school there, actually just about 3-4 months before that, me and my mom went on vacation down in the Caribbean. We started in Florida, and it's about a 6-hour flight from Seattle to Orlando. And I hate flying, not because I'm scared of flying or anything like that, but flying is just the most boring thing in the world to me, just sitting there where you can't move and you're just there for hours and hours and hours. So finally, when we get to the Orlando airport, me and my mom land, and it was a red-eye flight, so we left at like 10 o'clock at night and got there at like 6 o'clock in the morning, so we're tired. And we get to the airport and we're like, oh, dang, we're tired. Want to get some fresh air, so we go to the front door. We walk outside, and that air was not fresh in any way, shape, or form. It felt like I had been punched with like a blanket of wet, hot humidity. And we turned around and went right back inside that airport pretty quickly. And it was kind of the same experience when I got down to Trinidad to go to the University of the Southern Caribbean. I walked out the door, and my first thought was, I wonder if Walla Walla is still taking applications. So that was the experience there. It's interesting for other reasons, just because besides the weather. Because first off, obviously, it's very different culturally. It's a developing country. So you definitely see people who live in just completely different ways than we do here. And it's a bit of a stereotype, I know, but Caribbean people, for the most part, that I've met and talked to, are so laid back and happy a lot of the time. They do that with so little compared to what we have. But they're happy, they're joyous, they're upbeat, and it's a really nice environment to be in. The other reason it's been interesting for me is because while I do love to preach the word and public speaking's never been a problem for me, I'm a pretty introverted person. I kind of like to keep to myself. So the problem is I was the only white person at my school. Literally means the only white person. And it's kind of hard to just slip in a room when you're the only person that looks the way you do. So it kind of was an experience just to get me out of my shell, and with Caribbean people being the way they are, they're not a lot of quiet Caribbeans. As soon as you meet them, it's very, hey Victor, how you doing? Let's talk about 15 different things really quickly. So it's just been a really interesting experience with things like that, but it's been a blessing, and the Lord blesses my travels and keeps me safe, and it's just really helped me grow as a person in that way. And the thing is, with what I study, I've always been really interested in, as far as studying things go. I'm more of a humanities guy, history, English, things like that. But I've also always really been interested in physics and astronomy. Two things sometimes people kind of separate, like humanities and the sciences don't usually mix. But I've always enjoyed astronomy and space and things, especially like that. When I was a little kid, my mom, when we had this room, we got this room, and my mom took like these glow-in-the-dark planet star things, and she like stuck them all up on the walls and stuff like that, so when you would turn off the lights, bam, it would glow, and you'd see the planets and they'd glow and stuff like that. And it's kind of funny because we moved into a new house recently this year, and I got when we moved into the house, I got the room that used to belong to the little kid. Thanks for that, Mom.
You're welcome.
And their mom did the exact same thing for their kid, so when I turn off the lights now in my room, now that I'm 21, I still get bright shining stars and planets, and I get to look at that every night. But it just always amazed me, because the universe and the world we live in, it's so vast and ever expansive, and to me it shows a really interesting look on who God is. Because we talk a lot about how we serve an awesome God, an ever-expanding God, a God that's kind of beyond our comprehension in some ways. And I really believe that through looking at the universe and the galaxies, we can get a unique look at who He is. So Psalms 19:1 in your Bible, it says, "To the choir master, a psalm of David. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims His handiwork." So the first thing I want to talk about in kind of looking at the universe and this giant scale that we can see God through is light, for a couple of reasons. The first reason being light is the first thing God created, obviously. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and light was the first thing created. It's interesting to see, or think about, at least in my mind, and we think about that darkness, just the absolute blank nothingness that was over the entirety of the world. And God spoke, and then there was light. It shot out from wherever God was at that time, and the universe went from being absent and dark to being filled with light. And that's really interesting to think about, because light is kind of like the speed limit we look at in the universe. Albert Einstein, who, when we think of Albert Einstein, we kind of think of him as this really, obviously he was a very incredible physicist and scientist, but we don't really usually maybe think of Albert Einstein and talking about him with God. But the thing is, a lot of the things when Albert Einstein was studying and discovering, he wanted to study and discover because he believed it showed a lot of the mystery and wonder of God. That doesn't get talked about as much, but it was really interesting to me to learn about that. When he was studying things, he wanted to study and find the science and the physics to learn about God in a deeper, further way. So, talking about a lot of his theories and ideas, it was based on the idea that the speed of light is kind of special, and nothing in the universe can go faster than that. Light travels at 186,000 miles per second, or 300 million meters per second. And the reason that's interesting is because when we're talking about the universe and how vast and expansive it is, to really start to get a grasp on it, to see the distance, things like just basic miles or kilometers, things like that don't cover it. It doesn't work for when we're talking about distances that big. We have to use something like light. So we use what's called a light year in astronomy and physics, and that's pretty basic. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's the amount of distance that light can travel in a year. So at 186,000 miles per second, a beam of light shoots out, and how far it travels in a year. That's how we measure distance in space. That's nearly 6 trillion miles if you were to actually use miles for that. So talking about our own galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy that we're located in right now, it's 150,000 light years across roughly, meaning if I was to start at one edge of the Milky Way galaxy and then try to travel all the way to the other end, it would take me 150,000 years of time going at the speed of light, which is nearly, once again, 6 trillion miles per hour to reach that other side. Well, let's say we wanted to get out of the Milky Way galaxy. Let's say we wanted to go to our next closest galaxy that's available to us, and that's the Andromeda galaxy. That one's nearly 2.3 million light years away, meaning if I left the Milky Way galaxy right now, I wanted to get to that next closest galaxy, it would take me 2.3 million years traveling at the speed of light to reach there. See, physicists and scientists estimate that the size of the observable universe, and this is just the observable universe that God in His mercy and grace has allowed us to see so far, is nearly 46 billion light years across. Meaning it would take 46 billion years to get from one end of the universe to the other. And that's the expanse that God has created. We talk about our God being a creator God, a God who likes to build and create and make new things. And I think that's a bit of an understatement in our own human estimation, because He creates things that are so vast and incomprehensible to us. It's kind of amazing. But the other thing that's interesting to me, besides space and the distance of that in the universe, is just the concept of time, the ticking by of time and how that works. Because God's thought of time, just like most things that God can comprehend that we can't, His view of time is so far outside of what our understanding is. There's a verse my dad used to tell me all the time. It's 2 Peter 3:8 that just kind of really encapsulates this about how time for us and God is so different. 2 Peter 3 verse 8 says, But do not overlook this one fact, beloved, that with the Lord 1 day is as 1,000 years, and as 1,000 years as 1 day. So for God, time and us, it's not really something that we can relate to on the same level. But there was something, finally, I want to say, it was on, I used to watch when I was a kid, like the Discovery Channel, a bunch of shows about the universe and stuff like that, just because I had a desire and thirst for knowledge of that sort of stuff. And there was an idea, a theoretical physics idea, that kind of started to maybe, in my mind, help me just relate to what God's time scale was. And it was the idea of what's called a cosmological decade. We're talking about time. It's really hard for us to understand, but the most basic way to break it down is like this. If I was to start, let's say right now, and go 100 years into the future, not that I believe the world's really going to last that much longer anyway, but let's just say for argument's sake, we start right now and go 100 years into the future, and we call that one cosmological decade. Well, the next cosmological decade in physics would be 10 times the amount of all the time that had passed. So 100 years from now, we're talking about 1,000 years. And then the next, after that, 1,000 years had passed. The next cosmological decade after that would be 10,000 years. And you can see how after a few cycles of this, of each cosmological decade being 10 times as long as all the time in the universe that had passed before it, that you start getting into time scales that are unbelievably huge. You're talking about millions and millions and millions of years. I like to think of it like as a staircase where each stair is 10 times longer than the one before it. So you go up one stair, and then 10 times above. And the next stair after that is 10 times the distance of those two stairs together. And it was really interesting when I started to read this and just listen about this, because it's hard for us to comprehend these things because it's not on our scale of what we can understand. And it's interesting because I see a lot of characters in the Bible have kind of had that struggle of trying to relate to God on a way that sometimes it's hard for us to relate to. We go, God, we are these humans, we are these small characters, while you're working on these time scales of cosmological decades, and you measure distance and light years and hundreds of thousands of light years. My life will go maybe 80, 90 years, all travel maybe, if I'm lucky, 10,000 miles in a life.